Good morning, people, and welcome back to the Blues feed for a new episode with our same obsession as always, talking Chelsea. Today I have Danny, as always, with me. Danny, how's things, mate?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Not bad. Not as happy as I was before the Palace game, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, as expected, really. The optimism has started to fade already. There's a surprise.
And it
Before
might
we get
turn into rage if we don't batter West Ham on the weekend because West Ham are terrible.
before we get into talking Palace and everything Chelsea at the minute, we just wanted to remind you all of our 1K subscriber giveaway. We're over a third of the way there now, approaching 400 subscribers. And as we keep mentioning, once we get to 1,000, one of you lucky people will have the chance to win a 25-26 Chelsea jersey of your choice. But just make sure you're liking, commenting, and subscribing to the channel, and we will pick a winner once we hit 1,000. Talking of you lovely people and our subscribers, we're getting lots of comments on our videos, and we just wanted to talk about one of the comments we received in an episode last week, in our Palace preview last week, which was when the news broke around Tosin not being able to play and the fact that Eberechi Eze was going to feature. So the comment was from Dave Hannigan 1788. So thanks, Dave, for the comment. And Dave says, with Tosin unlikely to play and Eze in their squad, I'm more anxious about it. But we are Chelsea and we can beat anyone. Hashtag keep the blue flag flying high. And to be honest, Dave, that was exactly my thoughts when the news came out about Tosin and the fact that Eberechi Eze was in the squad for Palace. And yeah, I think the comment was spot on. We did miss Tosin's physicality, but I thought Josh was good, which we'll come on to. And I thought Eze was excellent. To be honest, he played like he had a point to prove, and it was one of them performances which you watch sometimes from sort of a mid-table player where you're like, he's ready to explode at a bigger club. Unfortunately for him, he's going to Spurs, so maybe that won't happen. Danny, what's your thoughts on Dave's comments?
Yeah, I'm similar to you. I thought it's a big shame with Tosin after Maresca basically screamed for a centre back and said only Tosin can play that central role. And then he was injured about 24 hours later, which probably means that they knew he was injured before Maresca then started being so vocal about it in the press conference. They just didn't announce it at that point. And I was a bit more worried with Eze in the squad because I thought he would have played really well to try and get that 5 extra million that Tottenham will have to pay to get him to try and prove the point. So yeah, I agreed with that. I thought Josh was very good. I actually thought he was probably the better centre back. I thought Trev was okay in defence. There was nothing wrong with his defending. I just thought he was pretty woeful with the ball at his feet. The amount of misplaced passes he did, or just underhit, overhit, wasn't playing the line breaking passes. So yeah, it was a pretty average performance all around in that kind of area, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, Dave, thanks again for your comment, and make sure anyone listening and watching on YouTube, you leave us a good comment that we can talk about in our preview for West Ham later this week. Moving on to that Palace game, Danny, it was slightly frustrating at times, but also sort of to be expected in a way. The fact that we have only had a couple of weeks pre-season, and I don't think that's a big excuse because we played very well against the likes of Leverkusen and Milan with a lot of energy and a lot of high intensity. I just think really it was a setup that sort of led us to being a little bit lethargic more than anything else. And also, I think players probably do feel the pressure of a league game over a friendly. The friendly, you do get the chance to go out there and play a bit more freely, but it was just something didn't click, did it? And I think from minute one, you could tell that something wasn't quite right. I don't know whether the boys have lost a little bit of confidence with losing Levi and Tosin. The fact that we're going to be a little bit more open at the back, as that lost a little bit of confidence for the team, stopped us wanting to lose the ball and being a bit more expressive. But Danny, what's your thoughts briefly on the Palace game as a whole before we dissect it a little further?
The biggest concern from myself was the fact that against Leverkusen, we were sharp, we were pressing, we were aggressive, we were taking risks. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this 2-week pre-season actually won't affect us because they've kind of basically just had a couple of weeks off and they've recharged and will go again. And then against Palace, we just look slow, we look lethargic, we look tired. We didn't look particularly aggressive. We didn't take any risks, as you said. We were very, very slow, boring, and to be honest, reminded me of a lot of the time last season where me and you were screaming at Maresca to change something because it was so boring and slow. I mean, we'll show the shape and the pass map in a moment, but it was just Josh to Trev, Trev to Josh, Josh to Reese, a little bit into the middle, and it came back again. We weren't really running at people. We weren't really trying to make any passes. I mean, Enzo Fernandez looked knackered and shit, to be completely honest. He was woeful. He looked like a shell of himself. I mean, we never got Palmer the ball in any dangerous positions really. And until the 85th minute, we played with absolutely zero urgency or any way to kind of plan or anything to break them down. And then in the 85th minute, it was like, oh shit, we better start doing something here because otherwise we're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to win this game. And then we started creating some half chances. But where was that urgency from the start, after half time, at all? It was just, yeah, very slow, very lethargic, zero urgency, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it does have to be said, we were playing against a good Palace side, albeit a side we should have beaten. And also, they're going to be high on confidence given sort of the FA Cup and Community Shield triumphs. But that doesn't excuse the performance because, like you say, we didn't actually try and beat them until there was about 5 minutes remaining. So
Yeah,
moving
that's
on,
got no slight on kind of Palace. I thought Palace were very
yeah,
solid,
exactly.
very decent. They're a very good side. I mean, I don't think many teams in the Premier League, like the top six, would have been particularly annoyed or disheartened by only a point on the opening day against Palace. But it was our performance was the issue. We
Yeah,
literally hardly created anything at all, apart from a couple of half chances that, well, like Santos ballooning one over the bar when he should have realised he had more time. I'm not particularly annoyed about him for that. It was a bit of a rush of blood, but it was just the way we played more than anything. It was just it looked like it looked like the pre-season friendly, and Leverkusen looked like the first game of the season. That was my issue.
yeah. Especially after those couple of preseason games and the way we performed at the latter stages of the Club World Cup. So something that Danny and I really want to dissect today, and we both feel quite strongly on, is the way we've set up in our last two competitive games. So obviously the Club World Cup final and the Palace game, and the way we've utilised the ball. So for any audio listeners, obviously you're not going to be able to see the prints we've got on screen, but we'll do our best to dissect it as much as we can in audio. And then for anyone watching, obviously you'll be able to see the items we put on the screen. So at the minute on the screen, we've got our shape from the Palace game and ultimately our pass map. And the first thing that sort of sprung a surprise on me was how far up the pitch we was, and the average sort of distance of a pass for Robert Sanchez, because you're looking sort of there probably 30 to 40-yard passes on average to our three centre backs, if you like, in Reece, Josh, and Trev. But then if you look how thick the lines are between the likes of Caicedo, Reece, Josh, and Trev, like that means that there's a hell of a lot of passes being played. Trev was relatively progressive looking into Cucurella, and the one that you can sort of half see there behind João Pedro is Pedro Neto, which this was my biggest surprise with how central Neto was. He should have been out there with sort of chalk on his boots, really, and he was actually just as advanced as Neto centrally, as Pedro centrally, and Enzo Fernandez was effectively playing as a right winger. So I'm just a little concerned by the way that we've set up for this game. I don't like Palmer in that left half space. I think he has to be on the right because, as a left footer myself, when you're in them sort of left half spaces, sort of corner of the 18-yard box, it really nullifies your angles to be creative and or even to get a shot off or slide somebody in. You're really narrowed down. Whereas if you're on the right and you cut in, you open up the whole field. and you can pretty much pass the ball or shoot from anywhere, any angle into any sort of area. So I was a little concerned by that, where we all know that Palmer does his best work either off the right or in the right sort of 10 half spaces. And like you mentioned, Enzo Fernandez had a bad game. It happens. Footballers have bad games all the time, and he was brilliant last season. So people getting on him with that is just a little bit silly for me. But I'm just a little concerned of the setup, the way that Pedro Neto was so central, the way Palmer was pretty ineffective because he wasn't getting the ball, and the lack of sort of directness from Jamie Gittins as well was a little concern for me, because I thought he was brilliant when he started against AC Milan last week when I was there. I thought he was direct. Yes, he's raw in the final third, but he was direct and he wanted to keep running the players. And I don't want that part coached out of him, because that's what's got him to where he is sort of today. I could go on and on for ages, Danny, but I want you to put your 2 pence in as well, and discuss what you think.
My concern is that this looks exactly like we looked when we were terrible. From the back end of, like, kind of from December onwards, this is the shape you looked at. You've got Palmer on the left, you've got Enzo nowhere near anybody, you've got Neto centrally, even though he's a winger, and I mean we scored a goal from him cutting in from chalks on his boots and flicked the ball into into Pedro, who scored the goal. I mean, Gittins looked like Sancho at the weekend, like no directness, cutting back, just passing in. Like, what's that about? We've just had Cole Palmer play back to Cole Palmer levels, where we're going, oh yeah, okay, everyone can shut up. Maresca does know how to get the best out of him, and he is the player that we all think he is. And then we go into Palace and we play him on the left. I don't know if there was a particular plan in place that just didn't work, or what is going on, or what the idea really was, because it didn't work. And I hope that we don't see anything like that at the weekend, on Friday, because it's going to be concerning, because we're going to face not to the same level of team, but a very similar setup in a five at the back, basically most of the time, with wing backs and very small spaces between everywhere. And if we play with the same idea and the same plan, we're just not going to be able to do anything. And then with the same intensity, it's going to be another 0-0, or maybe we'll nick it 1-0. We need to go back to that aggressive nature that we saw at the Club World Cup and at the 2 preseason games. Otherwise, we could be in real concern.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing for me, and you touched on it there, is the sort of the aggression and the way you approach a game. And I'm not talking about kicking lumps out of the opposition, but I'm talking about with intensity in the press and being aggressive with your passes by constantly looking to move the ball quick and move it forward into space. Get wide, get at them. And it's what we done well in the Club World Cup. It's especially what we did well against PSG and what we did in the 2 friendlies. And I was quite surprised to see us dither away from that. I don't know whether it's because of a lack of confidence in maybe in the defence at the moment. Obviously, there's a lot of changes going on there with the injuries we've had, with Tosin last minute not being available. Did that change the plan potentially? But overall, we've got to revert back to the sort of the PSG game and how we lined up in that game, with wingers wider, Cole picking up them pockets, João Pedro staying centrally and linking play, and then getting in behind and allowing for us to do that.
I think what you just said there might be exactly it. Why did Enzo Maresca change how we went from the first 6 months to the second 6 months? Was because he got scared about how many goals we were conceding.
Yeah.
Couple of injuries in defence, and boom, we start playing boring and slow and try not to concede more than trying to score goals. So I think there's an element to that, because if I show now the PSG shape, I mean, you've got Cole on the right hand side, with right up against next to João Pedro. You've got Gusto wide, you've got Cucurella wide, you've got Neto with chalks on his boots, you've got Enzo in the left half spaces, you've got a very clear pivot of Caicedo, and Reece James in there at that point, because obviously that's where Reece started in the PSG game. But obviously you could easily replace that with Enzo Fernandez if you're playing with him in the pivot. So yeah, I mean, and look at the lines as well. Look, we're playing wide. One thing that we looked scared of doing against Palace was we didn't look like we wanted to go out wide. We didn't want to give it to the wingers. It was really weird.
Yeah, and if you look at the sort of the graph we showed from the Palace game in comparison to this one, some of the lines between the centre halves and the sort of more defensive minded players are so thick from just a complete high volume of passes. Whereas there's not one line in this graph from the PSG game that is too thick, where there's too many passes being played between the same amount of people, because we varied our game. We changed it up. We constantly went in different directions, completely nullified PSG's threat, and they couldn't handle us because they didn't know what we were going to do. We were very predictable on Sunday. Look, it's one game at the end of the day. Nobody's overreacting. It's not silly. It's why I might maintain my stance of I'm not sure if Maresca will be the right man for the future of the club, but ultimately he has earned respect and he's earned a chance to prove himself, and I think he deserves our patience, and he deserves our trust for the moment, because ultimately he set up a game plan and a structure to beat the best team we've seen in probably the last 10 years in Europe. So there needs to be a little bit of patience and a little bit of calm, but it was a slight concerning performance, but let's hope it was a one-off, and that the tossing news threw out our plans, and ultimately he decided let's not lose the game, and we can rebuild in training this week. We've got a full week before West Ham, and then let's go again on Friday, and then we judge it then. Anything you want to add to the sort of the Palace game, the shape, and that sort of stuff, Danny, before we move on?
I think the one thing that I will just say on here is you've got like a clear 4 players in the bottom right of who is 23? Is that Trev 23?
Yeah,
My
yeah,
number, yeah, my number, my number knowledge is escaping me. So yeah, you got Trev, Reece, Gusto, Palmer on the right, and you've got Levi, Cucurella, Neto, and Enzo, all as like kind of that four man on either side with a clearly strong pivot in midfield of Caicedo and James. Why did we not do that against Palace, but with James not in the pivot and Enzo in the 10, or play Enzo in the 10, because it gets the best out of Cole Palmer by playing him on the right. I said before the game I would have played Neto on the left to kind of hug the touchline, go outside, whip crosses in, and nullify Munoz. And we had Gittins, who was pretty unremarkable. I'm not getting onto the back of him; he's very raw, but he was pretty unremarkable. And then you had Cole in the left half spaces against Palace instead of in the right half spaces, where he created 2 goals in the Conference League final and scored 2 goals and created a goal against PSG. And then you put him back in the left half space where he did terrible for 6 months, and wonder why he was a shadow of himself. But yeah, we'll see. I think just to reiterate my point on this positioning and left half spaces and stuff as well, for the people who can't see on the screen, we've got Cole Palmer versus Crystal Palace's heat map, and Cole Palmer versus PSG is heat map. Against Crystal Palace, he's in the left half space, just outside the box is his most kind of consolidated positioning, shall we call it? And then against PSG, it's exactly the same, basically, but on the right hand side. And yeah, scored 2 goals against PSG and created absolutely nothing against Crystal Palace. So this isn't just us trying to bash Enzo Maresca or anything like that. It's backed up in the data, both from the pass map both from a pass map perspective and also his heat map. And a 6.6 rating against Crystal Palace with a 9.5 rating against PSG.
This just completely proves the point of what I said earlier about the angles it creates, and as a left footer coming on the right and being able to open your body up and play anywhere across the pitch with any type of pass. You can't do that on the left. It's not the same. And people will think that sounds silly, but it's a fact. It's so hard to maintain the creativity and the angles of passing and shooting and that sort of thing when your angles are so different in that perspective. And I think it's also leaning into the same for Enzo Fernandez. You look at back to the PSG touch map, the pass map. He's so far on the left, and he was brilliant in that game, and that's where he was last season. He was on the left, and he was brilliant last season. So those little tweaks will change this dramatically. So
let's hope he does it next game, because if not, you'll hear a very strongly worded rant from myself in a week's time.
look at the difference in 4 days from your pure optimism on Friday for the Palace preview to now.
But it's giving me PTSD from the last season where I was screaming at Maresca to change things, and I didn't think he was going to be the right man for the job, and then he obviously changed it, and we got the results in the Premier League, and then we did well in the Club World Cup, and I'm like, okay, he's learned. He's an inexperienced manager. He's going to go through these times of where he has to work out what's right, what's wrong. And that's where I got to, why I felt more optimistic. He's learned, he's seen it in Club World Cup, he's implementing it more in the preseason games. I'm like, okay, cool. This is the blueprint.
Yeah.
And then he just doesn't do it in the first game.
There's lots of trials and tribulations to come throughout the season. I think we'll have patches like this where he will have to change it for whatever reason he deems necessary. He obviously feels like he had to change it for Sunday, and ultimately we come out of the game with a point and a clean sheet.
I'm not saying this is like, oh my god, let's sack him now. We're never going to do anything or anything like that. It's just concerning that we've gone backwards to what we were doing in the bad spells of last season positionally. When if you actually think about it from a perspective of what we did against Palace. If you just changed here, Palmer to where Enzo is and Enzo is to where Palmer is, would probably create so much more. So Maresca isn't necessarily doing too much wrong in the perspective of what we're doing. You're just putting the people in the wrong positions. Yeah. And that's my issue.
And ultimately, the players have got to take some responsibility. Like, if you look here, the passes in between the four of Josh, Trev, Caicedo and Reece, like, there doesn't need to be that many. Take a chance, take a risk, go forward. But it felt like they were too nervous to take that risk. But one player that I did think held himself in a high regard on Sunday and thought he played really, really well was Josh. I thought he dealt with the physicality of Mateta really well. He carried the ball more than any other player in the Premier League this weekend, successfully, and the amount of carries he did. And I thought he was, don't get me wrong, he wasn't Levi's level of progressive passes or line-breaking passes, but he tried it on a few occasions. And look, that's not necessarily his strong suit. He's more of a carrier than a passer from a progressive standpoint. And he said it himself on the Chelsea YouTube channel after that he's learning. He's learning the role and he's getting better at it day by day, but he's not there yet because he's only just started to learn it. He's been a fullback for however long, and I think his future is probably as a centre back, to be honest. And I think he showed that on Sunday. I thought he really, really handled Mateta well, and that was my concern coming into the game was Mateta versus Josh, because as a striker you're going to lean on the supposed weaker of the two, and also from Mateta's standpoint, he's played with Trev. Trev's going to know how to deal with him. So him sitting on Josh was probably always going to be the way to do it. And I thought Josh handled him really well, and I was really impressed with him, to be honest. Danny, what's your thoughts on Josh and his performance at the weekend?
Yeah, I thought Josh played really, really well, to be honest with you. I thought he was the better centre-back. I mentioned it earlier than Trev. I don't think Trev was bad. I just think Josh looked better than him. And to be honest, I think if the sporting directors and the club stick to their stance of we're not signing a centre-back unless loads leave, bearing in mind we've got 11 days or something left of the transfer market, so it probably doesn't look like that's going to happen, then Josh is the answer until somebody comes back. I still think Badiashile has the ability to play that central centre-back role, but Josh looks the most comfortable in it. I think if you put Badiashile next to Josh Achimpong, and you could have Badiashile's progressive passes and line breaking passes, I think we would have looked a lot better because he plays that role very, very well. So yeah, Josh held himself in high regard and probably proved why his camp are so adamant that they don't want Chelsea to sign another centre back, and it might make them rethink about their long term plans at Chelsea if they do sign one because they think he's ready, and I think he is.
Yeah, and thing is, I don't think we necessarily need to go and buy a replacement if we get the 2023 Badiashile, but it's just we've got to get that player back, and maybe a string of starts is what will do it for him because he hasn't started consistently since.
Just gonna have to manage him so carefully. Like you're gonna have to put him on the Reece James training regimen because
Yeah.
he just breaks down. He breaks down in training more than games most of the time as well. So
Yeah.
we need to wrap him up in cotton wool because I truly believe if you put Badiashile next to Trev at the weekend, next to Josh instead of Trev, we would have seen so much more line breaking passes because he does that all the time. He switches the ball very well. He's very good on the ball.
Yeah,
So
it's just his sort of Sanchezisms that need to be cut out.
yeah,
It's just them little brain farts. But
so I'm quite I kind of feel like that is a not playing very often issue instead of
yeah,
a player issue because he plays 3 games, goes out for 3 months, plays 3 games, goes out for 3 months. So I think we just need to do that. So I
and I
think
think
that's probably what the club are thinking as well.
yeah, because
Trust
we've
Josh
got
and
centre
play
backs.
Badiashile.
We do have centre backs. It's just if they are the level to keep us progressing is the question. And I think
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Maresca rates Badiashile, which is why obviously he wants this central centre back figure. And if Tosin's going to be injured, we're going to have to go and sign one. And I think a lot of this depends on Tosin now because you can sort of cope with Levi being out with what we've got. But if Tosin's out for any significant period, we're in trouble. So,
Which we should know in the next 2 days. Well, publicly know in the next 2 days because it
yeah,
will be Maresca's press conference, I'd imagine, on Thursday with us playing on Friday. So we should know by then how long Tosin's out, and then that should define what we need to do in the transfer market.
exactly. And I think the only way we can really go out and replace, because ultimately the replacement will be for Levi, not for Tosin, but it'll be because of Tosin we have to replace Levi, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm still not convinced there's anyone out there that's a attainable target, really.
No.
I know there's been links to Bastoni come up again, but realistically, I don't see Chelsea paying that sort of money because what's the long-term future at centre back if you've got Levi and Bastoni who are basically each
Get a
other
start
in
every week.
different
Yeah.
ways?
Yeah, but you can play them together. But I get your point. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting last couple of weeks of the window in terms of the centre back situation. Sanchez proved that he can only play well in America. He did make a couple of saves, but the goal that was disallowed, Jesus Christ, that is terrible from him. So
Yeah, it was awful. Awful. Just went straight through him. I think the only positive I will say on Sanchez at the weekend is he didn't do his normal Sanchez situation of he's made a mistake of a really bad mistake of letting that goal in. And yes, obviously it didn't matter because it was ruled out, but he didn't then flap for the next 25 minutes and make another mistake. That's the only positive I can take from it. And it doesn't look like we're going to sign a goalkeeper, so we're going to have to deal with Sanchez. And if we can take that slight improvement of him not flapping, then okay, cool.
yeah, exactly
all
that.
right.
Exactly that. On to go on, mate. Sorry.
No, no, you go.
Onto the transfer market, and it's been a little bit quiet since we had those explosion of transfers like a week, 10 days ago when the likes of Ugachukwu left. And Kunku's going to go definitely. I think where he goes could be a little bit up in the air, but I think Bayern Munich are still the favourites from what I know. Obviously, we put out, didn't we, last week that there'd been a broad agreement between the clubs, which was correct, but then Bayern have changed the goalposts a little bit, as have Chelsea, because of Nkunku not wanting to go on loan effectively. He only wants to go on a permanent, which I understand. He's 27 years old, like he wants to settle down and play his football. The clubs had originally agreed a loan with an obligation to buy around the 40 million mark, is what I heard. And now they're sort of talking around a permanent deal, but Bayern don't want to pay. Chelsea want 45 million for a permanent, apparently, which was the 40 million obligation. Sorry, they want a 40 million for a permanent because they asked for a 40 million obligation, which included a loan fee. I think it'll end up getting done a little bit cheaper, probably mid 30s or maybe early 30s with add-ons. That ultimately, Nkunku's happy to go back to Germany. Feels like that's the league that suits him the best, and hopefully that deal will get done, which in turn will allow us to finally complete Simmons, who, if you listen to Fabrizio Romano, is creeping up percent by percent. That's just to do with Nkunku's exit. The Simmons deal is done and ready to be signed as soon as the player leaves. So
yeah.
realistically,
Yeah, and I think we
Simmons,
got a little bit of stick on Twitter for saying that we obviously the deal was agreed and then it changed. People, what do they want us to do? To not put information out when we know it's solid, and then put it out once Fabrizio confirms it, and then you go, "Oh, you're just reporting what
exactly,
Fabrizio."
and people
We're
don't
putting out
understand
information
terminology.
that we hear. If you don't
You've
want
got
to listen to it or don't want to believe it, don't believe it. It's absolutely
And
fine.
you've got to understand the terminology behind it. A deal can be agreed and then be changed. Like that happens. It
Yep.
happens in everyday life, not just football. You could go to a market store and say it be £1. You say it's £1, and then you go, actually, I want to pay 80p for it. There you go. The deal was agreed. Now you've had to change it. It happens. It's life. That's what happens.
And for anybody who thinks about permanent, oh yeah, it was a loan with obligation, and then Nkunku turned it down because it's not permanent. The one thing I would say is look at Jadon Sancho. Obligations are usually either obligations that have terms to it, so certain amount of starts, goals, league positions, etc., or they have exit clauses, like we saw with Jadon Sancho. So Nkunku doesn't want to go there with the potential of even a small percentage to turn around and come back next year and have to do it all again. He wants to go permanently, as we all know with FFP and stuff like that. Obviously, Bayern Munich want to spend on Nkunku, and I believe they probably want to sign another attacker with the Musiala injury and also wanting a backup for Kane. So they're probably trying to do it less now because they're going to spend money elsewhere as well. Whereas if it was on a permanent deal next summer, they can spread the costs a little bit more. So
they didn't quite get the fee they wanted for Kingsley Coman either, because they expected Kingsley Coman to go to Europe and not Saudi. So that's where that was all stemmed from. Simmons is done pretty much from what we know, but it just does rely on Nkunku leaving.
And again, on anybody who doesn't believe that, are you telling me that somebody like Xavi Simons, who's been rung by Bayern Munich and other, like City inquired, other people are inquiring about him, and he's going, no, I only want to go to Chelsea. You think he's going to put his whole entire career on hold for Chelsea when we haven't got something agreed with Leipzig? Of course, he knows that the deal is basically done. Otherwise, he would have done a Kudus and gone to Tottenham or what have you. He's not going to take it to the last week of the window and then go, oh shit, Chelsea aren't going to agree a fee with Leipzig, and I really want to leave, because he ultimately wants to leave Leipzig.
Exactly. With Jackson, it's a little up in the air. I think Newcastle is still probably the front runners, I would say, from what I know. I don't know if Danny knows anything else. Aston Villa have come back in and inquired to see if the fees dropped. And Napoli are definitely interested now Lukaku's injured.
I think Jackson to Newcastle is probably still the favourite place we'll go, but it all depends on... I think there's a big domino effect that happens. I think Wissa needs to go to Newcastle first, so then Newcastle feel okay with letting Isak go. Then they try and get the maximum out of Isak, and then they come for Jackson. So there's a little bit of a domino. But as always with transfers, if Villa manage to agree some sort of, loan with obligation next year for Jackson, then maybe that goes quicker. Maybe Napoli now decide to go for Jackson because of the Lukaku situation. So obviously things can change, but I would still say that Jackson to Newcastle is most likely. Yeah. And we know this all agreed personal terms wise for him to go there. So
Jackson's terms are easy for any club to meet. Personal terms won't be an issue for Jackson. He knows he needs to leave to play. He's on a fairly low wage for for the standard of player he is in Europe. So that won't be an issue. And Garnacho's deal is similar to Simmons. It's done, but it relies on outgoings. It will happen, I would imagine, as long as Chelsea get the outgoings done they want.
My understanding is that Simmons is the one. So say Nkunku goes tomorrow, Simmons goes first. If Jackson goes tomorrow, Simmons comes in first.
Yeah.
And then the Garnacho one is a market opportunity. There's Chelsea know roughly what it needs to be done. There's a verbal on a fee, but obviously then the fine details need to be ironed out. And if it doesn't line up, then it won't happen. I don't think that's a.
I would be surprised if Garnacho is done much before deadline day or the day before.
Yeah. It's only if it makes sense on Chelsea's terms. They want him, but it will be only on that.
And they could even switch it back to a loan. At the minute, the deal that they're speaking about and that is verbally sort of understood to be agreed is there, but there's a chance that Chelsea put it back to a loan with maybe a slightly higher obligation and a similar thing to Sancho, with an exit clause. Sure. But like Danny says, Simmons will be the next one through the door as long as the players go out of it. And then once the likes of Disasi and Vega go, hopefully they will continue to look at the centre-back market. But like Danny says, that keyword opportunity has to come up first.
I think it will just end with Simmons and Garnacho, and then they'll. I think basically what they'll do is they'll force Maresca into trusting Josh, trusting Badiashile, and then if it doesn't look good enough in January, then they'll look in January.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool.
So that's sort of everything really that we're going to discuss today. A few little bits and bobs at the end there just to clarify some situations. Like Danny said, like if you want to listen to what we say, obviously we hope you do and we hope you trust us. And if you don't, that's fair enough. I understand some people will only trust the likes of Ornstein and Fabrizio, whatever. No issues there at all. Continue liking, subscribing, commenting, etc. And we will be back probably Thursday, maybe Friday morning for a preview of the West Ham game and hopefully Chelsea's first win of the season. Thank you all for listening, and we will be back on your screens and in your ears very, very soon.